Okay, good morning, everybody. Brilliant, thank you very much. Hello, good morning, and do take a seat. I know we're starting a little bit late, but we've got an action-packed session ahead of us. My name is Daisy Froud. I'm a community project facilitator from London. I've been working with Kate and Nicola and the CDC on the Thamesmead project. I'm going to tell you a little about working with the CDC today. So, as Nicola and Kate have said, this project is part of the Housing Association Peabody's regeneration of a very famous estate, transforming underused space into wonderful parkland for and with residents. Peabody invested £6 million in the project, plus clever top-up funding. So Thamesmead, as Kate said, is in southeast London, built in the 1960s on reclaimed marshland. It's the same size about as central London, so 47,000 people live there, a very big area. To decide what the project would address, the clever team first collected a lot of background data, looking at issues such as access to space, health, poverty, obesity. Other baseline work allowed residents' views to be understood so that concerns of residents to address could be identified and possibilities, positive things, could be amplified as work was taken forward. So there's summaries there, such as a word cloud. And then this is the story of our journey from 2018, when all the projects get going, through now to 2023, projects on site completing in 2024. Phase 1 was already completed with very good but quite traditional engagement to improve a number of the spaces around the housing blocks. And then phase 2 involved the following players. So on the left, Clever Cities, made up of the GLA, Greater London Authority, Groundwork and Peabody, working with community researchers, a design team led by Muff Architecture Art, so quite a collaborative practice from London, and then also the CDC residents who were recruited in Thamesmead, very important on this project. The project had a real emphasis on co-design, primarily through this community design collective. So 10 residents were employed and paid to be formally part of the client team and the design process, alongside a broader programme of community engagement. Now, of course, Clever is all about co-creation anyway, but this specific plan for the Community Design Collective, the bottom bullets there, was conceived in early 2020. The decision was taken to appoint the design team, so the architects, Muff, with their expertise in co-design first, so that they could lead on setting up the CDC. And finally, after the pandemic delays, the CDC was then recruited in early 2021, and they're still in place today. So the initial aim was only for 3 months. So that's a little potted summary of the project. I wonder, are there any questions at this stage about the project before I go on? Oh yeah, gentleman there, could you pass a mic? What's your question?
What do you mean by co-design?
That's a really good question. What do you mean by co-design?
Users being able to actively participate in the design process as both intended user and designer.
That's a really good point. Anyone else got anything that they'd want to add to that? Yeah, this lady here.
I'd say the people that are involved and selected are really important to be part of the process in their community.
Great. Sorry? Okay. I mean, they can clearly talk about it better than me, so yep, come on up. Okay. Do take a seat. Right, what else is important to think about then when we're thinking about co-design? Let's go with this. Yeah.
Well, surely you need to make sure that every party involved is talking to each other and sharing information.
Pretty important.
Also, co-design, it shouldn't be an afterthought. It needs to be embedded as soon as possible in any design process.
Couldn't have put it better myself, genuinely, couldn't. Okay, come up. Lot of hands now. Right, yep, this lady here, and that's got to be the last one because I really want to get on with my slides.
I think being genuinely flexible in the programme and allowing residents' voices to really contribute meaningfully.
Yeah, and what sort of benefits from projects actually goes back to benefit the community?
Good question.
To me, it's what the community makes of it. They are the co-design.
Okay, I mean, that adds up to a pretty good definition of co-design. You're coming on stage as well? Okay, great. Let's run the movie.
Every morning I awoken by, no, 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 the shrieks of the arched-back elderly woman walking her muzzled pit bull as she struggles to restrain this muscular vigour. I arise and open my window to take in fresh air as I gaze upon the brutalist paradise of angular concrete that lays before me. Rustling of the trees and chirping of the birds as they sing their morning song. Footsteps of the early morning risers as they march to the bus stop for their morning commute. The drifting scent of marijuana as my neighbours attempt to quench their mental struggles. My footsteps search for peace, accompanied by others. Hello and how you doing, mates? Dampened by the grind of mobility scooters, both young and old. The familiarities of our close-knit community, no face unknown to me. The self-interpreted facades displaying the construction ability of the people within. The decaying light fixtures and rusty overhead pipes of the old unused heating system harking back to a conformity of yesteryear. Now a breeding ground of coups in an avian graveyard. Vibrant aerosol work creates the backdrop for many a music video and urbanesque BBC drama. Footsteps from film crews break the blades of grass we call our gardens. Phases and stages mark the ever-changing brickwork as hardware in basic brush blows in the wind. Nestled in the reclaimed railway sleepers of the raised planters. The beauty of the dark concrete prefab slabs, a warmth to the London native. Contrasted by the bright bricks of the blanditude of the middle-class society. The carefully attended plats of the pony's mane stands free grazing in the grass unclaimed. The defiant stance of a community untamed by the concrete cage. Bats and birds are heard as night turns to day, and the buzz of insects from the lake not far away. I find peace in nature, a place untouched, a field of green to laze my days and not do too much. The smell of wildflower patches that have reseeded themselves. Newly planted trees appease the need for shade from the heat that swells. Southmere, waters that used to be clear, but recently pumped, so will be next year. Swans glide with ducks and geese beside, patrolling the lake is theirs. The new boathouse has been rebuilt, so soon the lake will be shared. What something is and what something must be is something that must be interpreted, not by you, but by me. This place is our home, not a dome, a place for you to test your growth. Provocation laid bare, of gentrification we are aware. Lest we groan your photographic opportunity. This is our community. Thank you.
Got slides. Hi everyone, I'm Nina. I am a resident of Thamesmead. I'm going to share a bit about my journey with Thamesmead and co-design. For context, I grew up in Thamesmead. I moved out in my early 20s, lived in East London for a while, and then have recently moved back and had, I guess, a tricky relationship with the area. And I think that's why it's important to talk about my experience of co-design and why the language we use and representation is really important for communities and what that means. So for context, I also work in the community engagement sector, so it's been a really interesting duality. For me, often it feels like we use language of deprivation when we talk about co-design, and when we talk, well, not co-design, when we talk about regeneration and communities, we've found to often identify with people that exist there. We we're so quick to think about improvements of an area, so quick to think about what's wrong with an area, talk about, outreach into these areas. And actually communities exist there, as Chris so nicely put, and we always have existed there. We have opportunities, and for us it's probably been about lack of investment. I show this picture of the lake. This is actually just after Peabody had started work. So to the right of there used to be an estate that existed that no longer does. There are new buildings that exist there, which is great to see. And actually for me, I guess the attachment to my area used to be also embedded in that language of not liking it, language of lack of, I guess, opportunity, lack of things to happen, and being part of the co-design process has been incredible. I joined it, I guess, in my early 30s, and I wish that I'd had the opportunity of investment kind of when I was younger to see actually what investment into places and what opportunities arise when you speak to communities and when they're involved in processes. It's incredible to see what's happening in the area now, art and culture strategies existing, us involved in decision-making processes, things to do. Often, I guess my generation left the area and they moved to other parts of London that had other things happening. And actually some of them are beginning to move back and settle. And it's a really, I guess, positive thing to be involved with. And actually, that there's, with Peabody, and my experience has been incredibly positive, there's a genuine need or genuine motive around decision-making process for the community. It hasn't felt tokenistic. It hasn't felt that we've been, picked out and just are there to, be shipped out today. But although this is great, and we're here for a positive experience, but I'm going to show you a couple of pictures. This one in particular, I'll skip through here. This is my nephews running around the area. And I think for them, it's such an exciting place. They can see opportunities that exist there. They see how fun it is. They see that there are new things happening. And I guess, wish that when I was that age, I could see that actually people wanted to genuinely invest in a space. So I think that when you're doing co-design, I guess really think about the impact it has on communities and the language we use to empower them, as opposed to talk about deprivation and the bad things that are happening in their area. That would be my takeaway for you all.
Hi, I'm Tim. I grew up near Thamesmead. Every time we left the house, you could hear this thump, 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 which were the piles being driven into the marshes. That was normal sound for me growing up. I've come to realise that I'm probably I've lived on Thamesmead probably for longer than most of the other CDC members ever been alive, because I moved there in the mid-80s when Thamesmead was in its sort of mid-teens. That was some 37 years ago. In all those years, experts have come and gone. They've told us what we need, given us what we need, and these things have been abandoned after being tried. They've been forgotten, they crumble, they've been left to fall apart. I can't think of a time in all those years of actually being asked, what did we as residents want? One of the things that was noticeable is you have on Thamesmead rented housing and homeowners. And as a homeowner, we would never have been consulted prior to the Peabody days because we didn't exist. I can think of a scheme where a blank area covering the 140 houses in the part of the estate I live in was a blank, that no one lives there, and so we could build next to it. Then we had this advert for co-design, this latest idea. Now the cynic in me says, is it going to work? But the first thing we had to do as a design team was to find a way of communicating with each other. I mean, I'm not sure how many people are sitting in this room, but obviously I'm sure everyone could name a different means of communicating one with another, and somehow we had to come to a consensus of this is what we want to do so we can share information. We can put our views together, not just to the CDC, but obviously to Peabody, our money holders and landlords, and to the contractors and the designers as to what we actually wanted. different platforms were tried. But eventually we came up with sort of common formats of where to share files, where to share information. Restrictions of COVID initially, as we referred to earlier, obviously meant we all got much more familiar with video conferencing than some people would have been happy with. But it meant in our own way we could develop systems that we could share this information. Like any new scheme like this, training became necessary. My background was actually with telecommunications, but I was so involved in civil engineering as part of my work, I could read the drawings and hardly anyone else could, and things like that. So we needed background training to be able to do it, but it was good to be in a team where things that I didn't understand, someone else there might understand and could share with me and explain to me, and vice versa. I could read and reinterpret something. So together we actually did quite a steep learning curve, but we did actually manage to learn. As a member of the local community, each one of us have found that we're not just someone who works in the area, who comes in each day and then disappears at 5 o'clock. We can discuss things with our neighbours, and the neighbours would think, oh, you've got an idea of what's going on. Other residents we meet at the doctor's or the dentist or just in the supermarket. We can calm fears. We can explain why the playground's been shut. It's because we need to build a new one. And we've made sure that it's going to have things that your children can play on. It's that sort of thing that made a difference. It meant residents who are worried that their house is about to be demolished and they see the playground being removed, put 2 and 2 together and make 5 quite quickly. That's something that was important, but as residents we would be trusted. So it was almost painless, I think, at times with the CDC. Co-design means that we, as local residents, actually get a say in what we want, not what others have thought is best for us, what we need. Why should we have a big sculpture if it looks nice? Because people want a picnic bench to sit on with their family and have a picnic. They want to eat their lunch somewhere. Yes, if there's money left over at the end of the project, let's have a sculpture for them to look at as well. But we need somewhere to sit first.
Hi, my name's Darrell. I've lived in Thamesmead since birth. I went to school there in Thamesmead. And I've also got most of my immediate family living there. So I joined this process when about 6 months before landing my first role in an architectural practice. And then I rejoined later on in the process I rejoined later on in the process in about stage 5. So I came back as not only a resident, but also an architectural professional. Just a disclaimer, I'm not an architect, that's protected in the UK, but I'm in training. So working with the CDC, I've been able to observe like different stakeholder dynamics in terms of like just the kind of interplay of conversations that happen. I think the timing of this opportunity of working with the CDC, it kind of gave me a way to experience co-design in a way that was kind of untainted by any industry exposure. So I didn't have any preconceived notions of what a design process should be. And so that enabled me to kind of rejoin the process, having gained some industry experience, but as a resident first, I was able to regain that kind of mindset. I think with what I've learned so far in both industry and having seen what we've achieved as the CDC, I think there's a lot of room for co-design to really be implemented in many design projects, whether they're large or small, if they have an impact on a community. Now, this probably sounds like it's maybe economically like not that viable, but we already take this approach with regards to sustainability. Most times, there isn't really a financial benefit up front when it comes to implementing sustainable measures, but we understand that we're serving a larger cause. I think even if it's for selfish reasons, anytime someone kind of looks towards sustainability and trying to implement it, it's kind of easier for stakeholders to engage with the idea that we're making a better planet for us to all live on, because it either directly affects them or their descendants. But investing in the social value of a scheme doesn't usually typically affect or impact the usual voices that are in the room. And so, I mean, if it does have any impact, it's usually kind of related to maybe money or publicity. They're not inherently bad things, but it can be hard to then measure how much those things influence stakeholder motivations. And I think with that said, the purest intentions are going to come from people that live in the community, because it really actually impacts us the most. And so we should really be brought into the design process, just like anyone to do with structures or surveyors. We should be brought in as experts on matters pertaining to the community, because who better to express that than us? I think there was an example, I think Tim alluded to it earlier, where we had a sculpture, so it was like a water feature proposed for this project. And I think we all kind of agreed that that wasn't really needed. And it doesn't mean that that was a bad design idea, it just didn't work for us. Another community or town may have welcomed that particular proposal, but I think it was important, and it's really important to stress, that we were able to speak up for the needs of our own. So I think with that in mind, as I continue my career in architecture, I think, I just need to keep that in mind in my career going forward. I think it's been important for me to be involved in this project because I've lived in that community my whole life. So it's a really kind of personal importance to me. But also going forward in my career, I think I need to be alert and aware of potential co-design opportunities, and also to be very aware of kind of the nuance of how an architect's assumed power in the eyes of others can be perceived in a process like this. Thank you.
I just want to quickly say how brilliant my colleagues are. They're just outstanding. My name's Anne. I'm a member of the Community Design Collective as well, and I've been living in Thamesmead for 5 years. I was born just across the river. I think this 5 years has been quite transformational for me personally and professionally. I work in a similar kind of setting as well. And it's helped me to answer some of those questions, those deep questions about, the ethics, the morals of development and where you kind of stand within that. What I'd like to talk about for these few minutes is about, I suppose, the limitations to co-design, to design specifically, not the co. I suppose I think about place as being made up of a whole host of things, an amalgamation of culture, systems, connections, flows of money and investment. And I think that as a panel and also as individuals, we've really had an influence over a multitude of aspects that go far beyond this design programme. Specifically, I suppose we've been involved in, leading on grants, being able to sit on the panel to kind of distribute small pots of money to enable other leaders in the community. We've been involved in activating and programming for places, so, collaborating with light festivals, putting on barbecues, dances, and so on. Personally, I've been involved in the Edible Garden, which was part of the design process pre-co element, and so looking at governance and stewardship in the long term for the community. I think as a group, we've really been able to impact by being part of the procurement process. So that wasn't an original intention of the programme. It was an ask that we came with, and we were allowed to be part of that. So we were trained and given an opportunity to sit on the panel, which gave an immense amount of pride and a sense of ownership and control over that process, which we wouldn't have had if we were excluded from it. And I just want to, I suppose, end on those key values that have enabled that. So really due to Kate and her sort of ethics and charisma, which has been one of openness, flexibility, and having an iterative mindset as to, our ability to influence the programme and beyond. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. My name's John, and I live in Thamesmead for 12 years now. My background is basically academically, I'm a chemist, but I work in financial services at the moment. So it's a totally different from what I'm actually doing part of the CDC. So I'm a CDC member, and I've really enjoyed working with a lovely team here, and Peabody and Clever Cities. It's been an amazing process. What I like to talk about is something called social values. So I'm just going to read out what the Oxford Dictionary says about social values. Social value refers to the wider financial and non-financial value created by an organisation through its day-to-day activities in terms of the well-being of individuals and communities, social capital created, and the environment. I think that sums it very well what social values are. To get to the crux of things, as a member of the CDC, I thought that social values was very important to the project, both in the short term and the long term of the project. It's a bit of a buzzword now, social values. It's implemented a lot in contracts organisations have for any project. So it's basically, simply it means that basically a percentage of the project's costs goes towards putting back benefiting the community on a short as well as a long term. This basically could mean basically providing jobs locally, creating businesses, sourcing materials locally, amenities to the local communities. So it's a very broad spectrum of things that would go back to the community and benefit during the short term as well as the long term. But however, from experience from what happened actually during the project, it was slightly different from what is expected, because once you got a contractor on board and they're starting the project, the builders tend to want to finish things very quickly. So we're going to finish the project and we're going to do things as quickly as possible. So unfortunately, one of the problems with social values is that how do you quantify it and measure it? Going back to my chemist days, a bit more theoretical and analytical with regards to that. So, for example, the contract that was used, basically they're going to employ 2 people, but all the value, the social value seems to be focused towards employing 2 people locally. But how do you then quantify what happens? Do these people continue to work for the company? Do they have a job for the future? You know, does it bring prosperity to the community? So it's very hard to actually do these social values without analysing it more. And secondly, reusing materials as well. I found that was a bit difficult because there's lots of waste, as you can imagine, like raised plant beds, paving slabs, and a lot of that can actually be used locally in the communities. I'm involved a lot with the Edinburgh Gardens with Anne and various communities regarding community projects. That was a bit lacking as a source. But however, this is a continuing project, and I feel very sort of empowered to be influenced. It's an evolving project. As Kate mentioned, it's a maintenance as well. It's not all, the project hasn't ended. It's going to be maintained going forward. So those social values hopefully will progress. And as you can see from behind me, this is on Abbey Way. Before this, this area was completely empty. Completely empty, and now you can see various things being put there. Obviously, there's a plant bed, and these thorns are actually reclaimed from the Thames River. So we were luckily allowed to reclaim these from the Thames River. And you can see here, there's a table tennis, a concrete table tennis table that's been put in place. And you can even see a barbecue there, a concrete barbecue. And we lacked a lot of seating space here in Thamesmead. So this way you can see a lot of seating has been implemented along the time. And we have a pagoda here. And also, you can hear there's even a dance floor as well. So I think all these things, this new thing with the help of Clever Cities and playgrounds, it will really benefit the community in the short as well as long term. And hopefully that will bring a lot of the community together and it'll be good for the future for everyone. And so thank you very much, everyone, for contributing, CDC members and everyone involved. I'll hand you over to my colleague. Last but not least, Vanita.
Hi, I thought I'd stand. 40 minutes is a long time to sit down for. Hi, I'm Vanita. I've lived in Thamesmead all of my life, which, looking at me, you can tell is not that long. But today I'm going to talk to you about social values. No, I'm not, sorry. About community voice. So first and foremost, I want to say that Thamesmead's residents are filled with unique, exciting, and most importantly, useful ideas that actually add genuine value to our town. During the process, I've encountered fiercely passionate people who express their ideas so eloquently and creatively that they directly challenge my own preconceptions about my town. This isn't just the case for Thamesmead, but for towns and cities across the world. The power of community voice should not be underestimated. It should be nurtured, encouraged, and seen as the powerful agent of change it is. I think co-design is a brilliant example of communities proving that they should be at the centre of their cities. The subversion of traditional power dynamics provides residents a unique opportunity to enact the change we want to see alongside one another, giving people the chance to share experiences that ultimately bind people together. Knowledge is power, and allowing residents to share theirs helps communities grow stronger and support one another. Throughout the process, I've seen how interlinked people are in so many different ways, and it brings me so much joy to know how each one of us has a unique voice, but we all come together and form one collective voice for Thamesmead. I feel part of something bigger than myself, and it's something that I'd not find anywhere else. And I think a feeling like that spreading across a town or city can become the foundations for great change. Beyond tangible design features, the co-design process has paved way for deeper conversations surrounding perceptions around Thamesmead and Peabody's relationship with residents. The process has allowed us to challenge narratives. We are not just victims of gentrification, nor is our home. By sharing the start of our long journey, I hope that our work reminds designers of their duty to its true stakeholders and paves the way for a new standard to be set for our home. Thank you.
Hello, and then we have, I guess, one last stakeholder to hear from, and that is Kate from Peabody. And I guess just as Kate slowly walks to the stage, it's really important for us to mention that having a champion within an organisation is really what makes co-design a successful process. Without Kate championing on our behalf that this is the right approach for Thamesmead, this definitely wouldn't have happened. So thank you to Kate and the team. And now you can talk about how much you love us.
Oh, goodness, thank you. I'm really glad we shipped you over to Hamburg. It's really nice to hear your voices on stage. I'm just going to reflect on 2 points. So one was, why did we decide to take this approach at the very beginning? And Daisy kind of alluded to it earlier. There was a phase 1 project. We'd made some investment in our public realm and our green spaces in South Thamesmead before, and it followed a very traditional process. Very top-down, assemble a design team and take a very traditional consultation approach to that engagement. And I'm also going to reflect slightly on something that Sean was asking in the earlier session about where does that power come from, and where does this idea to do things collaboratively come from? And I would say that people have been very supportive in that process, but I do think there was a groundswell. So I think it was from myself and other colleagues working in Thamesmead, getting to know the local community, recognising there was this quite a big gap between the way that we were looking at things and how the community looks at things. And we were, myself and others were kind of dipping our toe into this idea of what does co-design really look like. And it was from that, I think it was like the power of lots of connected conversations to actually champion a new process and say, okay, we could deliver this in the same way and get some really nice results, or we could take a different approach. And so that's what we did, and Clever Cities was a real impetus to be able to do that. And so the second thing that I wanted to reflect on is has it been worth it? And what is the difference? Because I think what's going to be interesting is we'll look at the phase 1 and then we'll look at phase 2, which will be finished imminently. And I think they will look and feel very differently. And I think one of the most powerful things that happened with the CDC was an early stage, and their input really defined the design direction. So we often talk about it as a priority that was created by the CDC to take a care and repair approach to the site. And so this is very much sort of your anti-regeneration. It's not about creating a blank space and starting again. It's that word care is really important. What is there already? What is already valued? And how do we repair that? Show kind of respect and kind of tenderness to the space. And this was made really loud and clear from the CDC. And the architects took that challenge on. And I think that what we will see will be something that looks very local, very kind of specific to Thamesmead. And I think that will be the big difference. You'll be able to walk around Thamesmead and very visibly and tangibly see the difference of going through a process like this.
Great. Perfect timing from the trumpeteers. Thank you, Kate. Great. So what we're going to do now is use what we've got left of the session for more of a conversational approach. I know some people put their hands up at the start, and I had to ignore them because we had something else planned. But obviously, it's a chance for questions for our CDC members from the floor. I'm going to ask them one big one first, because you've heard from them individually, then I'm going to come to Martin. But just overall, has co-design been worth it? Kate just talked about the overall value when she looks back on the project. Do you feel co-design has been worth it on this project?
Oh, was it for me to go? That's why I got the mic.
All right. Well, anyone who'd like to?
I can go if you want. For me personally, as Kate said, you can see really area-specific things happening that don't feel like they're a copy and paste across other projects. I think on a personal level, it's really made me feel, I guess, proud of where I'm from that didn't always exist. And I feel like we've had genuine involvement and say over what happens in our area and met some incredible people. I don't think we would necessarily cross over in other parts of lives. And their opinions and the way they interact with the community is really special. I mean, I see them in Sainsbury's on my runs, on the walk from the station when they're trying to avoid me. But it's been a real nice way to also meet people within the community that feel passionate about the space as well.
Thanks. And then any of you who had more cynicism at the start about the process, I don't know, maybe Chris or Tim, how do you feel, having set off?
Yeah, I think we started off not quite understanding how much power as a CDC we'd been given. So that was the start of the communications hiccup, was to actually realise that we were a key stakeholder, not just an advisory panel. But once we got into that, getting to the point of, well, if it's going to cost £25,000 to do that and we don't really want it, wouldn't we spend that money on something a lot better? And as I said, so like this water feature, which was a nice idea, but did it add any value to what we needed in the area? No, but benches along the path, places to play in, that was much more important. And we got that pointed through, as Kate has now pointed out to us, to actually swing the design round to, because we said straight away, you saw from a lot of those photos, the bridges, well, they were built with lights in. And within weeks, the lights would get kicked out. And so the previous landlords had repaired the lights that get smashed out in a couple of weeks. So instead of finding a more robust unit, let's give up, we won't bother with fixing it. And that had been the sort of attitude to these wonderful ideas, but were never maintained. And to hear Kate saying that we changed that whole concept into, we're not talking about the life of the contract from the contractor for 2 years, we're talking about what's this going to be like in 10 years' time, really meant a lot to me as a long-time resident to say, actually, we're thinking ahead for a change, not just what's going to get me the next prize in the next competition.
Thank you, Tim. And it is so interesting picking up on Sean's question about power at the start, Kate talking about power, genuinely being interested and feeling there's a groundswell for it to be released, but that point of actually we're so not used to having power as the people on the ground. And I think it's a point that was being made earlier as well. Can people seize it in Milan? That it takes a while to really understand and process, well, what are we doing here? How can we use it? And so often projects have to move very fast at the start, and by the time you've caught up with the power you have, as you say, some decisions are taken. So we've got some mics now able to head out around the floor. I know Martin is waiting here.
May I start, or? Yeah, I was going to offer to. Okay. Well, first of all, thanks a lot. I mean, in my slightly longer professional life, I attended a lot of conferences and sessions, and this was definitely one of the most interesting one. You're really, I mean, you're fantastic narrators. I could listen to you for hours. Have you thought about a Thamesmead podcast or something? It's really, I mean, I felt like I've been there again. So, well, thanks a lot. What was my question, actually? Yeah, Tim prepared it already quite nicely because, okay, of course, you're part of a community design council. This sounds all very democratic and very transparent and very bottom-up. But in a way, of course, you are a kind of elite, right? I mean, you're the ones that got power, and you're not only. I mean, you make your unique voices heard, and that's you've performed that very, very impressively here. But it's of course not only about your individual voice, but you're representing the wider community. So my question: did you feel like the weight on your shoulders, or were there some ways how you got feedback from the wider community in order to bring that into the process?
Who'd like to take that one? We can pass the mics around. All right, Darrell.
Yeah, I can speak briefly on this. So early on in the process, in around stage 3, we kind of had internet kind of, I don't know what it is, like forums where we could post the designs on Thamesmead Now website, and then we would encourage local community to then give their feedback on that designs. At that time, as Tim mentioned, we kind of didn't know the power that we'd be given. So I think, me personally, I know I could have done a bit better with that. But I think over time, we kept kind of slowly reaching out and engaging more with more voices. Because as you said, we can't always accurately represent the entire community, but it's better some voices than none. And I think hopefully going forward as well, more different iterations, voices, different CDCs, etc. can go forward.
I would just like to add to that my experience was pre-millennium, my small housing part had a very efficient residents association, of which some houses were privately rented, some weren't, but we were residents, not tenants or homeowners. And we started as the protest group route of we didn't want a big warehouse built within 50 metres of the nearest house out of our section. But that means that the long-term residents in my area still look to me and say, do you know what's going on? When's this hole in the road going to get fixed? So I still came from that route, where I know others have come from the youth groups or people like that. So that helped us to already have some roots in the community.
Can I just add very quickly? I think we're also maximisers, aren't we? We're all having many identities, whether that is through organisations or through actions, being a runner or a dog walker or whatever, So I think we collect information in that way too, so it's kind of expansive rather than just our own.
I agree. And the second point I was going to make during my talk, we didn't have time, is around, that's why it's really careful around representation in politics and how you select the co-design panel, because organisations could assume that by having people that look different and seem different, therefore the community is being answered and spoken on behalf of. And I think, kind of the secondary layer is really important, and not just to assume that we have all the answers all the time and that we're also talking to people. So it's definitely a challenge for us as a panel and Peabody to also challenge us back on, are we representing ourselves or the wider communities, and what does that mean?
Can I pick up on the second, or maybe the first bit of Martin's question, which was that weird thing of them also becoming the elite. So it does sound like you're doing an amazing job through being maximisers or through using the tech that you've got at your disposal to act on the responsibility you now have. But were there occasions when anyone was ever feeling, well, who are you to be deciding this? Sometimes I see that happen on projects. Or do you feel actually overall you had enough connection within the community that wasn't really an issue? You didn't feel troubled by your power, or others feel troubled by it?
Speaking of I think covering that, basically a large selection of obviously initially there was a lot more members. And obviously it was during COVID and we had to do everything via Zoom link. So people dropped out, then we had people join as well. So it was quite a diverse part of the community. But the people that actually stayed were the people that wanted to change. Because a lot of projects, the process is basically, they think, this community needs this, needs that. But it's actually not what people want. So it's actually good that the Clever Cities included us as local residents who've lived there, know locally. So people would come to us and say, what's happening here? What's happening there? What's happening in this project? Because sometimes the communications to the local community is not very good, because in Thamesmead, only about 50% of the people have internet connection. So you're expecting them to go on the internet and look at what's happening with this project, go on this website, this QR code, scan this. And a lot of people don't know that. Some people just want to speak to someone and say, look, what's happening? Why is this? Why are they digging up this road? Why are they blocking off this? This path. So we are part of the community. So involving the community from the beginning. And I think I implore yourselves for new projects currently or in the future to involve people in the community. We're not really elite.
So generally positive is what it wasn't that people were like feeling who. I think Darrell had one thing, and it's fantastic. It's positive. I feel I've been bad by raising the possibility that you could have been seen as tyrannical. But Darrell had one final point to add.
Yeah, I think if anyone did ever have that kind of direct response to maybe us, reaching out to our own community, I think we would probably just encourage them, look, we're going to take your point on board and make sure it's raised. And I think when we typically hear that, we hear it from people who are maybe suited and booted, and they're in political roles. So it kind of is a bit of a skepticism on whether that's actually going to happen. To see people who are actually like you, and it's like you've literally been selected because you're a resident, it has a different feel to it. So yeah, I think that maybe there's a bit more trust in our word when we do say that. So
great, thank you. Any other questions from the floor? Yes, pass the mic back.
Hi, my name is Margot from one of the sister projects, Podirac. We also did co-design in our front-runner cities and the follower cities and so forth. You guys really give the impression that this worked. You were working closely with a charity, basically. Do you think this would have worked if the municipality would have been involved? Because in our experience, we found that some of the municipalities are really reluctant to really do that kind of co-design process.
So basically, if Greenwich or Bex, yeah.
And then being really transparent about cost, about longer processes, which usually as a citizens you don't know about. So I was wondering that.
Who'd like to, Anne?
I suppose I can come on that just because I've worked in a municipality doing a similar thing, and there are so many points of contention or things that you just... I remember one phase, only engage so much, which was just so disappointing. It felt like there are many things that were blocking that process, and I think it is made so much easier that there's just one kind of authority that oversees one sort of narrative.
Yeah, thinking back to my working experience, they were widening one of the roads on the edge of the estate. Now, that wasn't part of this project at all, but the road was technically owned by Greenwich Council, but the houses on the Thamesmead side were the responsibility of Bexley Council. Bexley Council were given the overall project control, and I'm working on behalf of British Telecom, trying to move all our equipment out of the way, having to deal with two councils at the same time through the contractor on site So yes, I can see the difficulties of working with councils are not as straightforward. What was good with this scheme was having Peabody people who wanted to do it. So obviously when you are, as a community, trying to deal with a council that don't want to share with you, you're going to be more of a protest group than a cooperation. When you're with a group that want the community's involvement, that will make the big difference to the way it can work.
I just wanted to jump in here because I think I agree with all of that. Although the only thing I would say is that like Peabody is still a big, complicated organisation. Now it's not a municipality, but we do have different. There is a asset management team that sits over there. There's another team that's over there. There's the maintenance team over there. So it's not quite as complex as a municipality, but there are some parallels. And I think the point is key in any of those organisations is finding the people who want to do it and finding the people who care. They exist in all of those organisations, and a lot of you will be those people. And it's always a struggle. So like I wouldn't say that this was necessarily that much easier because it was Peabody.
Any other do you want to say something as well, Nina? No, okay. Any other questions from the floor? Yep, one from over there. I think we've managed to get another mic back, so now you're having to do a job of racing around.
Hi, Helen Nielsen from Malmö, a municipality. So we as a municipality, I work for the Environment Department, we really love to work closer with our local communities. You're saying the challenges. What 3 things or 3 tips would you give to us as a municipality to better create and develop cooperation and some sort of co-design, co-creation with our local communities?
Yeah, do you want to take that? And people, because we haven't got a mic, everybody, if somebody feels I'm not getting to speak, just look at me or tap me, okay?
I think like genuine early engagement from the offset, so even allowing people to shape the strategy around what that means for you, because sustainability for people means very different things, and having preconceived ideas at the start of a co-design process makes it difficult. So I'd say that for sure, and genuinely meaning like allowing people to shape that strategy. Having a cross-section of the community represented is really important. And then I guess my third, I think openness and flexibility. So when things change, when they develop, and I guess I mean that in terms of a lot of things. So in terms of the power dynamic, you have to be flexible and allow people to be equal players within the decision making, within the strategy setting, and truly want that to happen across the organisation. I guess flexibility in terms of Anne's points that things iterate and change a lot, and that's a good thing to go through because it means the product that you're getting out at the end of it is impactful for that community. That can be frustrating, I'm sure, for developers, for designers, but this is also part of the process, I guess, building in bigger time frames within a project. I'd say that we would all think that was probably a good thing, and having, I think the 3 things I would say, stuff around, a genuine want to do it, and involvement early on, stuff around representation across communities, whatever that looks like in your own communities, because it probably looks very different to our one here, and just flexibility and openness in the process. But other people might think that's not correct.
I would agree with everything that's been said. I would also say it's important to find the voices, not so much of the smaller organisations, of the community organisations, that as well, but of the individuals. You really have to get your magnifying glasses out and find the individuals. And you have to find the people that can communicate with them as well. If you have failed structures that are already in place, you need to really look at how they are operating. You need to employ new individuals that can be a bridge of communication to these individuals who have these voices. You need to really spend a large majority of the time finding these voices. And that is the only way you can create a large demographical team of people who can diplomatically come to decisions that will benefit the community at large.
Kind of touching on that in a similar way, and to what Nina said about openness, is kind of being open to, you know, new structures of how we actually do this thing we call co-design, or design in general. Because if we actually want to kind of get a different result, we need to be open to doing new things. I don't think we should do away with structure. You need that to at least have something to stand on, like a framework to build upon, but be flexible within that. If we want to, we can't keep doing what we've always done to get a different result. I think that's as simply as I can put it.
I'll just come in on Chris's point with an example. So in the Edible Garden, which I know you visited yourself, we sensed that people weren't engaging, but we knew there were people that had previously engaged, and obviously at some point they just fell off, or they just became disengaged. And I would just say, you know, so what we did was we went back to them. We weren't discouraged. We listened again and had an honest conversation, and had a difficult conversation, and heard lots of criticism, and took that on, and then made a plan to actually listen to those things that they wanted, and responded, you know, rather than kind of shy away from that difficult conversation.
I just wanted to add to that, because Anne and John and others who aren't on stage now have done so much work in the Edible Garden. I just was going to put that into context of some figures, because it's quite extraordinary, the approach that they've taken in the Edible Garden. So we, pre that approach, I think we had about 30 people engaged on 2 gardens, and then within 1 year of visiting the garden and engaging in it. And I think you're up to like 700 within 1 year, which is a huge jump in numbers. And that is exactly as you say, of like not being discouraged, being very present on site and knocking on doors and repeatedly, and being really agile and flexible in terms of your programming and your approach. I just think it's really impressive.
So hopefully some useful advice, not just for municipalities, but for others too. Thank you, CDC and Kate. Any other questions that anyone? Yes, so one at the back, and then we've got 2 down there.
So thank you for coming to the conference. Thank you for Clever to organize this panel with the real people. It's very important to have you there. I know that, so I'm running Urbinat project, and I face many times the challenges for the community to be involved in this process, mostly because they are very long, so there is a kind of fatigue to be part of these. And I saw that some of you start in the middle, some start maybe earlier. I would like to know how is this being part of these long processes, and if you talked about, or if you in some way were rewarded by your participation. So if it was volunteered, or if you were rewarded. This is a topic that it's difficult to approach, how far we should reward the people that participate. What do you think about that?
Pay them, give them money. If you respect their opinions, then give them money for their time. These people have jobs, full-time things that they're doing with their lives. If you want them to give some of their time to you, then respect their time, and then they will respect the conversation that they're having with you. Everyone here was part of a similar co-design process, even though they may not specifically have been part of this specific co-design process from the very start. Everyone was part of a similar co-design process in the Greater Thamesmead area. But I just want to say, if you want to reward people, then most definitely do that. These silly little rewards are just going to be insulting to people. If you respect what they're saying and you have weight that you're going to implement what the changes that you want them, you really have to respect what they're saying by the same way that you turn up to work every day for a reason.
But I guess what enables that on this project is the formal nature of who you are, so that in terms of budgeting ahead, there's not like an infinite pot, but then they know that there are X amount of people who are giving X amount of money to. So that formal structure then creates some of the things that have been discussed or asked about already in terms of a group. What do you feel about that? Well, I mean, it's good to pick up that question about the duration as well. So your feelings about committing to this long-term process, clearly the money helps. But how much was the setup of the group something that enabled that, the payment? The paying is really normal now in the UK, by the way. It'd be really kind of bad practice not to.
Yeah, to echo Chris's point, also in terms of pay, I guess not to inflate people's egos, but you're effectively employing consultants for an area. You would pay a consultant to come and look at water and test water. You'd pay consultants to look at safety. And what you're doing is effectively giving the same weight and value to the community. I mean, that's a really good best practice model, and showing that you genuinely are committed to that as outcomes, because you know, their time. I mean, we don't get as paid as much as them, but also it just gives validity to the opinions. In terms of timeframes, I guess we were chatting about it's fine because we know what the expectations are. I guess there has been bits in the middle of projects where it feels really unmotivating because contractors might change, priorities might change, but because we're involved in what they are and the openness between the two organisations exists, you can see what the benefits are of delaying processes, for example. I guess the harder thing is how you then keep credibility in the wider community. And a bit to Martin's point, yeah, we have power and knowledge because we're involved in the process, but how that disseminates across the communities and you keep motivation across there to ensure change is happening is probably the more difficult thing. I know it doesn't really answer your question, but I think I would just bear that in mind in terms of timeframes. It's fine for us, I think.
I mean, you certainly, those of you who stuck at it certainly did, didn't you? I mean, Anne made the point early on that it was actually only supposed to last 3 months, and then you did longer till the end of the design, but then it's you who actively say, we need to stay on for the procurement. And I think that's exactly because of what Nina's saying, that you're not just being paid out of respect, or you're not just being paid for your time, you're being paid because this is a kind of expertise that nobody else can replicate, the knowledge of what it is to live on Thamesmead. Because that was quite extraordinary that you said, no, we need to stay on this project all through this bit. I think, Darrell, you're waiting.
I think by default, we're plugged into the process for as long as we live there. Like, we are bought in more than any stakeholder that comes into the design process. Like, we were there before and we're going to be there after the design is finished. So we almost have no choice to be brought in. So for us, it's kind of just living, but having the power to affect change in our community.
Great, and I think there's a question here. Wonderful.
Hello. Well, actually, it was the same as our colleague Gonzalo. I was interested more about the structure of the community design collective that you have, because I'm Liliana from Clever Cities Milan, and we've been working with so many design activities to implement our nature-based solutions. And we've seen, of course, through the whole process in different projects that were very different to one another. Of course, in a very smaller scale, in a building scale, and not a very large neighborhood scale. But however, in all of them, we've seen the importance of having activators for each, because you cannot manage to involve all the community. You have to have the representatives. In our cases, all of them were in a voluntary basis, but of course we struggled a lot with the coordination of and distribution of responsibilities and having the feedback of the community. So that's why I was really interested to know the insights, what kind of incentives did you use to have the work done, and amazing results that you shared with us today. But of course, in our case, for example, an insight, because we had projects in social housing where the people were retired, so of course they had time to dedicate to our project. And of course, some of the residents living there were mobilizing other 187 families living in those social housing. But in on the other side, we had also community managers of a resident area, but we struggled to communicate with them precisely because of lack of time that he needed to dedicate to our project. even though if you think we are getting paid, of course, for our work to develop the project, and we give our time to improve their environment. So you think, okay, why they don't dedicate time to their own environment, that they will be using it to make it better and to have their voices heard. But of course, I agree with all of these, that you really need to pay and to reward the time, even though it's for your own house, because of course it's the time that you dedicate backwards to the person that is working in that project. So
it's so interesting though what you said at the start though. You were using phrases like looking inwards and how the structure works, and it's actually a question I would really like to ask the CDC, and I think it is really another form of tip to people in the audience who are thinking about it. So you are a group that the core of which has been going for a long time. You are a very different set of characters and people with different experiences. What is the secret to your success in the sense of, how have you continued to work as a group rather than a set of individuals telling Peabody? And what advice would you give to people in the audience trying to set up similar groups? Sorry, I didn't tell you I was going to ask that one, so. Because it was a very good question from there.
As you may have noticed in the montage that was earlier, pizza does play a good part in Unity. But simple things like that, yes, none of us were doing it because we wanted another salary. But obviously having respect, showing the respect by being paid for your time. I used to be a school governor, and sitting in a meeting where we've got the government inspectors telling us the school is not good enough, you are failing. I'm the only one not being paid to sit in that room and take that. And so I shocked the head teacher by losing my temper a little bit and telling them, well, you failed because you came in here with the wrong set of questions, and actually put them in their place. There's not often you get that opportunity. I will admit it was a unique situation, but I was stuck in that situation of not being feeling I'm not respected, but I've got the same legal responsibilities and everything, and being blamed for everything, and I don't get paid. To be paid as part of the CDC meant, well, if they're paying me, they're going to listen to me, because listening and then acting on are two different things. But if they're paying for my time and my advice, there's a good chance they are going to act on it. So yes, you do need to reward the people, and then things like that, our collective experience, that we could support one another. As I said earlier about, well, I can read the drawing and explain it to the others, this is what that expert is talking about, or someone else could explain to me, this is what the budget works.
So supporting the group in skill sharing rather than bringing in external trainers.
Yeah, that teaching yourself as a group can be more effective than just having someone come in and say, well, if you do this, this and this, and this is what happens, and you only, what's the average for a training course? 40% of it goes in at best.
You put me out of a job, Tim.
Yeah. Sorry, Daisy.
You're going to say the same? No, yeah, the Oh, Anne, you go first then, Darrell. Yeah.
I guess we don't always agree, and that's very useful, actually. But I really, I think we all respect each other's opinions, actually, and that challenge. And if there's an idea that we, the care and repair example, for example, that kept coming up and being taken more seriously. And I think we then as a group backed that. I remember Liam talking about it a lot from the beginning, and, oh yeah, that makes total sense. And then kind of us all getting on board with that. So backing each other, and then largely also just having a really good leader on this side of things, not to over sweeten things, but yeah, really you need a very sensitive leader to be able to facilitate the group as well and manage us.
Oh right.
Also, talking about pizza, it was really funny to notice the hotels next to Domino's, and that's what we eat on a weekly basis. So, it is, quite iconic. I guess the point I sit on two of the groups, actually, Vanita and I both do, looking at two different projects. There are very different dynamics, I would say, across both of the groups. In a good way, you might want to add something about it after, that feel equally as passionate about the different projects that are happening. The communication style is incredibly different, not to devalue either or of the groups, but the outcome's still the same. It's a passion about their area and the delivery and wanting to get something done. We have a facilitator that's independent that comes to each session, which might be something that people might look into. We have really clear structures at each session that's often fed to us before, so we know what the topic is that's coming into it. There's a complementary training programme that goes alongside it that's either led by people in the group with our expertise or externally. We go on different field trips to look at other projects that we're able to feed back about. So there is a really clear structure of a programme that exists and a lot of forethought goes in. We're able to shape that at times across the different areas, but it's not just, we don't just get together and have a chat, we do that, but there's a really clear outcome at each session. And across the two different groups, there are different decision-making processes. So in one of the groups, I sit with Vanita, there's a really strong consensus approach that we decided we would take across the other group, and that's slightly different with the CDC. So again, I would let the groups that you work on lead it. I don't know if Vanita wants to say anything about, because you also sit on both the groups with us. You don't have to. Sorry.
Has she said it all?
Yeah, I feel like Nina's definitely said it all.
Okay, Vanita just said, it feels like Nina summed it up. That was quite an impressive summing up. And yeah, Darrell said, reinforcing really what Tim said. Both Tim and Anne. So yeah, there's how to run a group like this. We've probably got time for one more question because I know somebody was waiting over there. Yes.
Thank you. Holger Ruprecht from ICLE. Last night I had the opportunity to open this conference by a speech. I could not convey my gratitude. I said I could not convey my gratitude to people that work on the ground. So I thanked people on behalf, the city coordinators, which definitely are important people. But now I would like to grab the opportunity to thank you personally also for what I believe is a shared commitment. You've got the commitment and responsibility to create impact on the ground, and I think you, in great colors, painted the picture what that actually means and what it meant and what it will continue to mean for you. We, as people that have different roles in the project, we have a different commitment and responsibility to grab the experience and transpose the experiences, the processes, the methodologies, the impacts that you create to other places in order to hopefully make other communities also participate in what you have experienced in the past few years. So I believe it's a kind of shared commitment and responsibility. However, I fully appreciate that what you do is completely independent. You can do it every day and you will create your own environment. We are completely dependent on what you do. Otherwise, we could not do our work. So my full and deep gratitude to all of you. I have one question though, and this goes to Kate from Peabody. And I remember very much the opening, which was also here in Hamburg. We had a discussion on what is called the key performance indicators of this project in technical terms. And I happened to sit in a round table with a colleague from Peabody, and at the end of the day, and after all, Peabody is an economic actor. So we discussed the potential key performance indicator for Clever Cities project from an economic actor's point of view, and the colleague brought forward the proposal to have a key indicator being the frequency of people moving in and out Thamesmead. The reason behind, for those people that are not sort of technically into that discussion, was it is cost. When people move in and out in high frequency, it is cost for the company because they need to do renovation and maintenance.
We've got 2 minutes till the end of our session.
Sorry, my question is, what is a result? After all, do you economically gain from the process?
Oh, good question. Right, so
What a question. I don't know is the answer. And I guess I'd be interested to know who that colleague was and understand a bit more of the detail of that conversation. As far as I'm aware, we're not measuring that at the moment. But I also think that is a longer term question to like really see the impact of of how long people are staying in the area. It's a good question that I don't have a good answer to, but will stay in my brain and will...
Any CDC members got a reflection on it to end the session?
Can I say something quickly? Going back to a question that was raised about communication with the community, in addition to the people you see represented here, we also had a lot of community activation days, community testing days, whether that will be bringing in children, creating awareness through any kind of local channels that you already have in place to try and test play equipment, potential play equipment that can be temporarily put up, whether that's testing a barbecue and seeing how the smoke interacts with the local residents. And even if your communication methods that you already have in place are not working, the visual communication of people actually seeing that community day happening will then create a ripple effect in the larger community to carry on to the next community day that you have, that will then bring more people on, and to just keep going with that and use the communication methods that you have in place, and don't be afraid to use the visual communication that you already have in terms of the testing day.
Which I guess in terms of that question, you're kind of also saying it becomes very impossible in the end to quantify things when those ripple effects are happening, how you even begin to measure those webs of things going out as people participate and others participate. Do you want to have a final word? I know that you did have a thought on the economic value. Fitting the final word comes from Nina, not the chair, so I'm going to hand over to Nina just to reflect on that.
Thanks, Daisy. I guess it's a reflection of my own experience of the area, but friends of mine that didn't live in London are now buying properties in Thamesmead and Abbey Wood, and that probably definitely wouldn't have happened 15 years ago. I don't know what that says about investment or what that says about people's perception of an area, and that's something for you to take away about your own external perceptions of an area without investment into other things. But I guess on that point, they probably are making money because they're investing in the community, and what your motives behind investment into communities is on your own notion. But yeah, people are definitely moving in and enjoying living in the area that otherwise wouldn't have done.
Thank you very much. So we're just over time. I'm going to be closed. Okay, we can gently close the session. But I do want to say thank you very much, CDC. Thanks. I mean, amazing that Clever London brought you all over here, because yes, only you can speak about this project. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your reflections on some of these questions. Am I right in thinking that if people have other questions throughout today at the conference, you'd be happy to be approached and give more detail? Because I'm sure there's lots there about their experience, particularly of a group like this, that people would like to tap on. Yeah. Join the WhatsApp group and they'll let you know. But I think now it's the lunch. Yes. Great. Thanks.